So my name is Shyamla. I'm a performing artist. I'm also a writer and an editor and, well, recently since COVID I've been doing a bit more hosting and stuff like that. But as a performing artist, my main practice is fusing South Asian arts with other forms of, with street dances and other cultural styles from around the world. I was born in Ondarawal country, which also known as the Sutherland Shire. My father migrated to Australia in 1969, which was when the White Australia policy was in place. He met my mother, who is from Fiji, also of Indian ancestry. My father's from Chennai, my mum is from Fiji, but her family was actually blackbirded from Andhra Pradesh. I'm not sure when, but that's how a lot of Indians got to Fiji. Dad was working in Fiji, met Mum, and then they came back. So my dad's been here since he was 14. So he was one of the first they were one of the first Indian families ever to migrate to, well, as far as he's told me, to Sydney.
Yeah.
Having grown up being the only particularly South Asian person, I was not interested in my culture at all growing up, even though my father was a Carnatic singer. So that's a classical Indian tradition. So I grew up singing Sari Gama, Pa De Nisa, but I'd hide all that. We even had like our little household shrine and we kept it sort of hidden away so that anytime someone came over you could sort of very quickly hide all traces of your culture. So I grew up doing tap, ballet and jazz from the age of 4, and dance was everything for me because at the time I was getting bullied a lot, and it was the one place where I was, I guess, seen for my skill, and where if I did well and I practiced hard enough and I performed well enough, it didn't matter what colour I was going to get some level of credit. I actually did grow up watching in classical Indian dance. So because my dad would perform at temples and religious functions, at community events, I was exposed to the culture, and we would go to the temple. Even though I didn't want to be a part of it, I always grew up with it. And it wasn't until I think when I left school and, left uni and probably came to the city and realised there was like a whole bunch of other people of different backgrounds that I became really interested in cultural styles of dance. But I think that journey, that decision, I guess, to focus specifically on South Asian, like my own heritage, only came in my late 20s. So I'm 30, what am I? Oh gosh, I'm 36 now. And I feel like I'm still really new on that process. It just takes so long to unpack all that stuff and then realise that essence, that root that you grew up with, whether you wanted to, keep it arm's length or not, it's there, it's in you, it's been programmed into you. So, and I think probably listening to my dad sing Carnatic music was probably why I loved hip hop and rap so much, because there's really complex rhythms, there's very complex flows, and I always saw similarity between the two. So I always asked a lot of questions, and I'm guessing if someone like me grew up in India, you don't ask those questions. You just go and do the thing and you're part of it, and you just understand that that's the way things are. So I think me even asking my dad, I at the time interpreted him as him not wanting to tell me and getting quite annoyed, but I don't know that he even knew the answers. So I'd ask, like, why are we walking around this statue this amount of times? Why is this happening? Why is that happening? And he's like, just be here. And I think that works if you're immersed in the culture and you're living the culture, but once you've been separated from it, things need to be explained to you. And I think if you miss that opportunity to explain to your kids, they're already, you're lucky that they're even asking. That shows that they're kind of trying to take an interest. But, I try to maintain empathy though, because I remember my dad came here at 14. So what he would have went through when White Australia policy, and we still haven't spoken about it yet, would have been quite intense. So I didn't grow up with language. My parents made the decision not to teach us. So my mum speaks Hindi, my dad speaks Tamil. So for them, it was easier to we'll just teach them English, let's let them blend in, like we can blend in, looking like this. So I feel like a lot of my learning my culture has happened later, and I've had to take that interest. And now I feel like I'm probably learning more than what I did when I could, traveling to India, immersing myself, doing my own research, talking to my mum and dad as adults, and getting past that defensiveness of why didn't you teach me my language? Just been a very sort of sore point, because that's a big thing. To think, I'm literally the first person in my lineage that wasn't taught an Indian language. It's pretty full on, right? And so I know bits and pieces, but dance was how I was able to connect. And that's the reason why it's so important to me, because I can feel genuine and authentic and viscerally connected to my culture without having to talk the language or be able to speak the words. My classical Indian form that I learn is Kuchipudi. We have to say bowls, so you have to articulate the rhythm with your mouth before you do it with your feet. But in doing that, the more you do it, the more you're speaking language. It's a musical language, but I think that's been the way that I've been able to connect. I invited my mum to come and watch some sessions with my guru. I have an amazing guru, Sri Raghavan Nayaji, and in her 60s now, my mum started practicing. And that practice, that form of art that we do, Kuchipudi, actually connects us to our ancestry from India that she was even separated from. Yeah, because that was a process of colonization as well. When they took Indians from, the south, they all just spoke Hindi, but Hindi is a North Indian language. I think I met my guru about 4 years ago. And I actually was trying to seek out a Kathak teacher. Kathak is a North Indian dance style. And through the ways of the universe, I was led to him. I said, look, I don't do Kathak, but I do Kuchipudi. And he showed me the movements. And then I realized that this one, Iyengetram is like the big performance that you do as a classical Indian dancer that I witnessed when I was very young, which I thought was Bharatanatyam, because that's the form that everybody knows. And when I saw this young girl perform, she was very quiet because she was a family friend. We went to Canberra for it. I couldn't believe the difference in the person that I knew and the person that I saw hold down. You perform solo for an hour and a half with live musicians. It's incredible. You play out all the stories, and I was just mesmerized. And it was Kuchipudi. And I realized only once I met him, I'm like, wow, this is so deep. This is that thing I was exposed to when I was young, and I didn't even realize that it had that personal, ancestral, very particular connection, not just to India, but to the state. So, when I learn from him, he explains a lot to me. We joke. It gives me this safe place where I can ask questions about my culture that I don't even feel, I guess, comfortable asking my parents, because there's all that tension and history. And we eat lunch together afterwards, and, we share, and he tells me stories. And over the years, I've gotten close with his wife as well, and we all sit together and eat. And it's just the most special thing. He's like a second father to me. There's nothing like it, and there's nothing that could replace it. For a long time, I really felt a bit fraudulent, because I guess through my 20s, I was very much, I started getting booked for Bollywood gigs and feeling like I needed to pander to what other people thought of my culture. And it never sat right with me. I do the gigs and I dress up, and it's nice to dress up and look pretty, but I just I felt a bit gross because I'm like, is this really me? Or am I just doing what everybody else wants to see? So it took me quite a while to realize that I didn't have to, I thought that if I didn't do that, I wouldn't get booked for those things. And it's hard because if you're a performing artist and you're making your sole income from performing, you know, you've got to walk that line where you've got to feel good about what you're doing and you're not just pandering. So that was why I ended up creating Bindi Bosses, because I wanted that space where I could just be free to explore the intersection of culture and outside of culture of different influences as well, without feeling like it had to fit the prescribed format of what I knew would get booked. And the crazy thing was, it was far more well received, I think, than anything I'd ever done previously, because I think it's not even about South Asian, it's about people from different backgrounds going, they're being themselves, but they're also being what they've grown up with as well. What is art? What is art? I think art is the place where the self and the external meet. So for me, I can't perform until I've gone in. And I guess whether it gets interpreted as art is up to the audience. But I just think it's that plane where those two worlds, the inside world and the outside world, come together, and in ways that can make people feel things even if they don't necessarily understand cerebrally what's going on. You know, whether it's painting, it's visceral for me, all forms of art, and that's what I find so attractive about it. It allows people to feel and experience things for themselves, even if they may not understand the history or, you know, what they're seeing. They can still feel something. There's an energy that's created that I think is very sacred and very special and, yeah, endless and ancient. So in terms of like spirituality, I think having that time to reflect on yourself and really know who you are is I think for me it goes hand in hand with art, because if I'm not sure of who I am, I don't feel good about what I produce, because I think it's not grounded in genuine self. So yeah, for me it's an integral part of art. I find when you do create from a place that reflects your truth, I think people feel that. And I think that's what resonates and that's what cuts through, is when people aren't just sticking to genre or a fad or a trend or the latest thing. And there are some dance practices where there are strong traditions, especially within classical Indian dance, and there's very good reasons why some teachers are very strict. But at the same time, I think when you're able to play and see where those different genres can meet, that's when you bring together people from different parts of the world, different, you know, musicians and life experiences, and it can all come together. That's why I really believe that if you do something with the right intention, the right people will find you, and I think it can happen very quickly, but that alignment might take 30 years. So that's what I felt like with Bindi Bosses. You know, I had a period where I'd left one Bollywood group and I was a solo artist for a while, and I went all over the place trying to figure out where I was and who I was, both as an artist and as a person. And then I got to a point where I'm like, you know what? I grew up dancing to Janet and learning choreographies off the TV and doing like funk and hip hop and feeling that. I want to mix that up with my cultural heritage. And it turned out there were other people that wanted to do it too. I mean, Bindi Bosses started in April 2019, and then I said, let's do a workshop. And it was so great because the workshop was like not just South Asians, people from, and there was like mums and their daughters and all together just like sharing space and sharing culture. Through that, we very organically, I didn't have an audition process, but we met other dancers and then just kept going. And now there's like a group of 8 of us. And through COVID, we basically just use the time to really get to know each other better, but also to train and to just solidify as a group. The theme for TEDx last year was real. So I did an opening, just a talk about my experience growing up in Australia and not seeing myself represented, and then, you know, why Bindi Bosses has been created. And then we did what would have been a very confusing performance for people that mashed up like Metagen, which is like Baker Boy and Jess B, with Patasu, which is a Tamil song, and finishing with Gunda, which is also Tamil. So we kind of make a point of not doing Bollywood. We're kind of repping the South. And it had everything in it. It had like a bit of Afro, had a bit of hip hop, had like a village dance called Kuttu. It had a moment of classical Indian as well. So it was just like that unapologetic but proud and probably confusing, but we also don't care. Yeah, this is us. Amazing. You don't need to understand it. Like when I'm in Australia, you know, you get that "where are you really from?" Mm-hmm. You go to Fiji, you try and say a few words in Hindi, they laugh at your accent and they don't realise that you're so sensitized around that you will stop trying. Go to India, oh my gosh, I can dress however I like, I can cover my hair up, but just by the way I walk down the street, they know. And they can size you up and how much they can rip you off by, it's crazy. So yeah, the first time I went to India, I'd never felt less Indian in my entire life. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm Australian. And I've never really fully identified with being Australian. I was like, oh, well, I must be Australian because I'm definitely not fitting in here. If you want that respect for your culture, you have to give it to others, because there's always the people from those cultures, despite their fractured relationships with their cultures, which I think all of us have growing up here, we all deserve, like, there's still something in it that's been born into them that you can never replicate, and you can spend as much time there, but there's still a line. But I think as long as you're aware of that line and you're willing to do the work and dig into the roots of things and unpack things and understand things and be, we can't now, but be social and go to parties and go to events like that. Culture, especially dance doesn't happen in studios. All these styles, most of them happen in villages and streets, and that's where they emerge from. So I think once it's kind of cool to realise that irrespective of what the cultural background is, the roots of it can be quite similar in that sense. And it's about community, it's about getting together, it's about celebrating life, mourning death, celebrating birth or... Yeah. For me, the most important thing with art is to be true to yourself. If you're trying to create art to change the world, and you have no control over that. You have no control over how someone perceives it. Making a political statement outside of yourself. It's different to like when it really sort of comes from you. But just checking yourself constantly and allowing yourself to be vulnerable and watching yourself. For me, that's what I love about art. It gives me permission to do that. I don't have to be good all the time. Like some pieces that I've created have come from heartache, and it's nothing special, and they don't necessarily have to see the light of day or be performed on a stage, but that's all still a really valid part of my process. All those moments of self-doubt and self-hate and it's all valid, and we all go through it. And I think you have to love it all and know that none of it is forever, and just accept the transitory nature of all of it, how you feel about yourself, what the restrictions are right now, whether you can do a gig or not, how you feel when you wake up today compared to how you feel at the end of the day. But I'm learning that I think some level of a routine is really useful. So for me, that means doing at least half an hour of yoga, sitting quietly, working on my breath, even if I wake up in a foul mood, just forcing yourself sometimes And other times not. Just go outside. If you've gone outside, like, and you've been inside in a funk, that's a win. For me, like, the more I feel like I am allowing myself to be vulnerable in my art, the better I feel about myself, irrespective of how it's received. Because a lot of my career as a dancer has been performing and entertaining. And that doesn't do it for me anymore. And I can see what happens when people get caught up in the response they get, like, you know, that entertainment side, and that has very serious effects on your own personal sense of self and your mental health over time, especially as you get older.
Yeah.
There's a point where you actually get beyond culture and then you drop into, like, just the experience of being human. That's what I find really interesting now. Like, I think I've kind of done a lot around culture, but then when you can drop below that and find that humanness, you know, whether it's a First Nations culture, whether it's an African culture, whether it's a South Asian, that's the space that I think is really, really special. Like, finding ways to use your culture to express these universal human qualities. Yeah, and it doesn't matter if someone's from a different culture sees that. They can understand, like grief, you know, something like that, which is so everyone has an understanding of it and different ways to express it, I think.